The AI race just keeps ramping up. I'm sure you guys have seen by now the crazy poaching offers that are supposedly in the hundreds of millions for individual researchers and engineers that Meta's been putting out there trying to put together a really powerful AI research and intelligence building team. We haven't seen much from that team so far because they're all just now starting at Meta. It seems like they finally realized how far behind Llama was, and instead of pretending, they're reinventing. And we just now got a blog post as well as a video from Zuckerberg, who's totally not an AI or robot himself, breaking down how Meta's thinking about AI. There's a ton to dive into here, from how Llama used to be good and where it's at now, to the chaos of all of this poaching, to the place that Meta's trying to find in this increasingly intense market, to whatever this cringe video is about to be. As always, even though I talk about React a lot, Meta is not paying me a cent. I do own some equity in them, but it's not enough to be worth talking about. I'm here to give you my most neutral take, trying to cover everything going on in the crazy AI business world. But as the React team's #1 unpaid DevRel, I have some bills to cover. Quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. Today's sponsor is Augment, and their thing is lots of context really quickly, so I'm going to go as fast as I can to show you the benefits. Here's the React code base. It's massive, because React is massive. I asked it to find me the case where useEffect can return an object. It's kind of a fake out question because it's a new hook I'm looking for, use resource effect, and it just found the answer in under 20 seconds. If it was just the chat, it would be worth it, but it's not. They have an agent mode too that uses that giant context engine that handles any amount of code you throw at it. It's pretty unbelievable. You might notice that I'm in VS Code right now because it fully works with VS Code. It also works in JetBrains and NeoVim too, and also in Cursor, Windsurf, Tray, and everything else that's compatible with VS Code extensions. They've been really good about publishing everywhere they can. When I saw this quote, I knew I need to include it. Every feature in Augment feels like it was built by people who actually ship software at scale, like Vercel, Spotify, Webflow, Uber, and all of the other companies already on Augment. What are you waiting for? Try them out today at soidev.link/augment. So I really want to read the blog post, and I promise we will momentarily. But whenever I see a video of Zuckerberg talking to the camera directly, trying to make it look like a phone video, I have to watch.
All right, you ready? Hey, everyone. I want to talk about our new effort, Meta Superintelligence Labs, and our vision to build personal superintelligence for everyone. AI keeps accelerating, and over the past few months, we've begun to see glimpses of AI systems improving themselves. So developing superintelligence is now in sight. But there's this big open question about what we should direct superintelligence towards. A lot has been written about the scientific and economic advances that AI can bring, and I'm really optimistic about this. But I think an even more meaningful impact in our lives is going to come from everyone having a personal superintelligence that helps you achieve your goals, create what you want to see in the world, be a better friend, and grow to become the person that you aspire to be. This vision is different from others in the industry who want to direct AI at automating all of the valuable work. At Meta, we believe in putting the power of superintelligence in people's hands to direct it towards what they value in their own lives. Some of this will be about improving productivity, but a lot of it may be more personal in nature. This is going to be a new era in some ways, but in others, it's just a continuation of historical trends. About 200 years ago, 90% of people were farmers growing food to survive. Today, fewer than 2% grow all of our food. Advances in technology have freed much of humanity to focus less on subsistence and more on the pursuits that we choose. And at each step along the way, most people have decided to use their newfound productivity to spend more time on creativity, culture, relationships, and just enjoying life. And I expect superintelligence to accelerate this trend even more. The intersection of technology and culture is where Meta focuses, and this will only become more important over time. If trends continue, I expect that people will spend less time on productivity software and more time creating and connecting. I think that personal devices like glasses that can see what we see, hear what we hear, and interact with us throughout the day are going to become our main computing devices. I believe deeply in building personal superintelligence for everyone. And at Meta, we have the resources to build the massive infrastructure required and the ability to deliver new technology to billions of people. I'm excited to build this future, and we've got a lot more to come soon.
I know I'm not supposed to sit here and roast the video, but there are so many little things. Just give me a second, guys. I'm sorry. I have to do this. We'll put a timestamp on the screen for whenever I'm done just overanalyzing the video. This was a classic teleprompter read. Watch his eyes going left to right throughout it. That is him reading lines of text on the teleprompter. Even though this is meant to feel like a selfie type phone video, they put the phone behind a teleprompter, which is kind of hilarious. The reason I noticed that isn't just because I look for it because I pay attention. It's also because it looks like he just came out of an intense VR session. I hate making fun of people's appearance. I genuinely don't like doing this. But the white glows around his eyes and the redness at the top of his nose looks like he just got out of a 6-hour session on the Oculus Rift. Like the OG heavy one. Yeah. Or tan lines from the glasses. Could be that too. Good point, chat. He also had a stutter because they tried really hard to one take this. They didn't edit anything, and I have respect for that. But he had one word that he had to redo. There were a couple other teleprompter flubs. Like the big one is if something's on a new line in the teleprompter, you'll naturally pause, even if there's no natural pause in the wording, which makes it feel really robotic and unnatural. So as much as I think Zuck was improving at the whole he's just a robot thing, this is not helping the case. This is not helping the case at all. My hot take, and I've considered even doing this for our own stuff, I kind of want to just start recording product updates on the selfie camera on my phone, holding it, talking to it, and just posting it. It's important to be a human in this world where everything is more and more robotic, especially when they're considering their direction to be being more personal. Meta's position in AI. I want to go read the blog post still, but I want to dump some thoughts here before I forget to. There's the personal versus productivity split. I'm going to put a weird part here. Well, open versus closed, which makes sense. That's not as weird. But the weird one I wanted to put was Windows versus Mac, Android versus iOS. We'll cover all of that in a minute and how Meta's thinking about their position in the world. I have more I want to put here before we get started. I want to psychoanalyze Zuck. I don't normally do these types of things, but I feel like I understand him in a way that isn't properly communicated in other people's content. It'll be fun. But first, I want to cover the meta.com/superintelligence page, which funny enough is just an HTML page with almost no JS in it. I thought this was a truly novel, cool thing they did until someone in chat linked Safe Superintelligence, which is a similar website from Ilya's company. Ilya helped invent the modern concept of AI through LLMs when he was at OpenAI, and he's since left to make this company called Safe Superintelligence, and it seems like Zuck is personally quite inspired by it. Let's read the Personal Superintelligence post. Over the last few months, we've begun to see glimpses of our AI systems improving themselves. This improvement is slow for now, but undeniable. Developing superintelligence is now in sight. It's a somewhat common belief in the AI development world that once AI can make itself better, then it will inevitably become superintelligence because the AI can do that indefinitely, forever and ever. Imagine a person that can just keep working out. They don't have to get tired. They don't have to sleep or take breaks. They can just keep on working out. There would be a ceiling to how fit they could be that we don't currently understand. That's what superintelligence theoretically can be or get us to if the AI can improve itself. It seems clear that in the coming years, AI will improve all of our existing systems and enable the creation and discovery of new things that aren't imaginable today. But it's an open question what we will direct the superintelligence towards. In some ways, this will be a new era for humanity, but in others, it's just a continuation of historical trends. As recently as 200 years ago, 90% of people were farmers growing food to survive. This is all stuff that he said in the video. At each step, people have used their newfound productivity to achieve more than was previously possible, pushing the frontiers of science and health, as well as spending more time on creativity, culture, relationships, and enjoying life. I'm extremely optimistic that superintelligence will help humanity accelerate our pace of progress. But perhaps even more important is that superintelligence has the potential to begin a new era of personal empowerment where people have greater agency to improve the world in the directions that they choose. I don't necessarily agree that AI means more people can have more impact. It increases the amount of stuff that any given individual can do. But when everyone can do that, the value of any one person goes down, not up. If we think of this in terms of YouTube versus pre-YouTube, in an era before YouTube, if you were filming videos that were being published at all, they were probably being seen by people. And it was way less people making video, but the average person making video was way more successful and had way more reach. Now, anyone can make video, and the average video creator gets one view themselves when they're posting the video. While giving the access does increase the amount of successful people doing the thing, it massively increases the number of unsuccessful people as well, and it doesn't necessarily increase the impact that a given successful person has on the space. Is a big YouTuber really that much bigger than a big television star was 10 years ago? I don't necessarily believe so. So in some ways, this is worth thinking about, but I don't necessarily agree that better tools means bigger successes. It means smaller people can have more success, but it doesn't change the ceiling of success at all. As profound as the abundance produced by AI may one day be, an even more meaningful impact on our lives will likely come from everyone having a personal superintelligence that helps you achieve your goals, create what you want to see in the world, experience any adventure, be a better friend to those you care about, and grow to become the person that you aspire to be. Meta's vision is to bring personal superintelligence to everyone. We believe in putting this power in people's hands to direct it towards what they value in their own lives. This is distinct from others in the industry who believe superintelligence should be directed centrally towards automating all valuable work, and then humanity will live on in a dole of its output. At Meta, we believe that people pursuing their individual aspirations is how we've always made progress expanding prosperity, science, health, and culture. This will be increasingly important in the future as well. The intersection of technology and how people live is at Meta's focus, and this will only become more important in the future. If trends continue, then you'd expect people to spend less time in productivity software and more time creating and connecting. Personal superintelligence that knows us deeply, understands our goals, and can help us achieve them will be by far the most useful. Personal devices like glasses that understand our context because they can see what we see, hear what we hear, and interact with us throughout the day will become our primary computing devices. We believe the benefits of superintelligence should be shared with the world as broadly as possible. That said, superintelligence will raise novel safety concerns. We'll need to be rigorous about mitigating these risks and careful about what we choose to open source. Still, we believe that building a free society requires that we aim to empower people as much as possible. The rest of this decade seems likely to be the decisive period for determining the path this tech will take, and whether superintelligence will be a tool for personal empowerment or a force focused on replacing large swaths of society. Meta believes strongly in building personal superintelligence that empowers everyone. We have the resources and the expertise to build the massive infrastructure required and the capability and will to deliver new technologies to billions of people across our products. I'm excited to focus Meta's effort towards building this future. Okay, first question I have, how likely is it that the following essay was written with AI? 20% chance. Probably not AI. Anyways, I want to break down how I'm thinking about Meta's current position. I want to start in a weird place. Windows versus Mac. Many of y'all are probably too young to have been around for the OG Windows versus Mac days, and if you're a developer in modern times, it probably feels like Mac has largely won. At the very least, it feels relatively even. I need you guys to understand just how much this is not the case. You might be confused looking at this chart, like how does that work if it's Mac versus PC? Like how is it showing the two? This is multipliers of PCs versus Macs sold. So in 2004, there were over 50 times more PCs sold than Macs. So whenever one Mac is sold, 50 PCs would sell. The sheer volume of this gap is hard to properly put into words. Okay, here we are from 2010 to 2025. PC has slowly dwindled and Mac has slowly recovered, but there's still just an absurd, massive gap here. And even Chrome OS is starting to break ground and get comparable numbers to Mac. The point I want to make here is that Windows won really hard. Why am I bringing this up? Because there's reasons Windows won. And these are things that Meta has brought up before, things that Zuck has talked about before. The idea of the open platform versus the closed platform. Mac OS, the software running on Macs, used to be OS X. That software can only be run on a Mac. Yes, there are Hackintoshes that let you kind of run Mac OS in other places you're not supposed to, but it's way less reliable and not officially supported and entirely against the terms of service. Whereas Windows is on everything. Microsoft didn't even sell computers for 40 years. They just sold the operating system to computer manufacturers to put on their devices. The bet Microsoft was making is that the computers would become more and more commoditized, and if they were to make the software platform all of them used, they'd be in a much better position than any one hardware company. The idea of investing in an open platform where anyone could buy the software and use it on their devices was so weird and not believed in at the time that IBM let Microsoft make the operating system for their PCs. And that's a big part of how Windows started. It started as MS-DOS, which was an operating system that Bill Gates bought off of some random guy for really cheap and then resold a license to IBM and got a clause in it that he could keep selling it to other companies as well. And IBM's like, whatever, we're going to win the computer race anyways, who cares? And look at how IBM's doing compared to how Microsoft's doing. Betting on the platform was the right move, and Microsoft did very, very well as a result. So much so that Apple, despite having way better software and at many points much better hardware, couldn't break into the market meaningfully until other platforms started to become popular. The thing that saved Apple was not the Mac, It was the iPod. The point I'm trying to drive home here is that Microsoft made a bet on a platform, a thing with lots of developers contributing, lots of software and hardware interoperability, lots of hardware options, trying to provide the user as many choices as possible. That included different versions of Windows. They would have Windows NT, Windows Home, Windows Pro, and enterprise versions, all of the above. The goal here being to give people options. Make so many options that people could decide on what they want instead of telling them, here is the thing that you want. Apple went the other way. When you bought a Mac, you had a very small set of options that Apple provided you and software that Apple provided you. And the majority of the things you would do on your Mac were using software Apple made. To this day, some of my favorite Mac programs are built by Apple. And to this day, some of my least favorite Windows apps were built by Microsoft. I have to fight the stupid Copilot thing every time I turn on my Stream PC because it insists on opening and crashing in a new way. There's a huge gap between how Apple thinks about their platform and how Microsoft does, and this is a huge part of how Microsoft won in the PC world. So what about mobile? Even though Android was clearly open platform in this split and Windows was the closer to open in that split, there was a big change that made iOS feel more open early on to a lot of people. A big part of why the Windows open platform was so good is that I could go to a random store and buy a disk for some Windows software. I could go to a random website and download an exe for some Windows software. Mac software was harder to find, harder to get set up, and generally less capable of doing things on my system because Apple did a better job of securing the system. The point I'm trying to make there is that your ability to find the software you want and install it felt much better on Windows than on Mac. If you need a program to handle your spreadsheet data, or if you need a program to do some weird management in your backend for your hair salon or whatever, there was a much better chance you could go to a store and buy something on a Windows computer than on a Mac. I actually worked at Staples during the Windows 7 to 8 move, and people were still coming in buying disks with software on it for Windows. That market was massive. Obviously, you can't put a disk into an iPhone or an Android phone, but something very interesting has happened since then. The App Store. I'm bringing up the App Store because I think it killed a lot of this open versus closed distinction, because to the average person, the benefit of the open platform was it was easy to have choices and find the thing that you want. Now you can just do it in the phone itself. The fact that iOS choices are more limited than Android's choices doesn't seem to matter, because in markets that can afford iPhones, Apple tends to win. In markets that are cheaper, Android has much more competition on the lower end devices because they can put out a $200 phone using cheap hardware. Apple won't do that. I think this distinction is meaningful because it shows that the open versus closed platform thing has kind of eroded, and that what we were looking for the whole time was never, I can install whatever I want versus Apple chooses what I can install. What we were actually looking for is a lot of options so we could pick the one that we felt best fit us. Apple sells 4 different phones: the normal size, the big size, the Pro, and then the Pro big phone. They do that because different people have different preferences. Then once they get the phone, they install the apps that they prefer. Maybe somebody likes WhatsApp, somebody else likes Twitter DMs. Maybe somebody likes using photos through the stock Photos app. Maybe somebody else likes using Halide or something like that. Since the App Store gives you those choices, you now feel like you're personalizing your phone and your platform to yourself. You can do slightly more on Android, but the gap felt less big than it felt with Windows versus Mac, especially when you were getting your software by going to a store. The reason I'm talking about all of this is that Meta has historically bet to the left here. They have leaned into the open platform because Zuckerberg, believe it or not, is a genuine fucking real nerd. He comes from the early days of Linux. He clearly loves open platforms. He continues to contribute to open source even when his competitors just don't seem to care to. Mark Zuckerberg very clearly wants to build open platforms, and he deeply believed for a long time that that's how he would win. They did this with VR, they did this with React, and they were doing this with AI, where they were the only US-based major lab putting out open models for a long time. And for a bit, that was huge, because the Llama models were the only options we had that were good enough to be worth using, that we could also retrain to do other stuff. We could distill on them, we could do crazy things with the Llama models. But something kind of unexpected happened. DeepSeek happened. And DeepSeek quickly lapped whatever Meta was doing with their models, and to this day, DeepSeek R1, like the original drop, still outperforms the best open models that Meta has published. I have it on pretty good report that at Meta, they're no longer banned from using other AI models for their own personal work, like deving and doing AI code complete. And that has changed things internally very quickly, because previously, obviously, they were trying to dog food their own things, but embracing the market in its current state and using the best tools has allowed them to go much faster, and they've been rethinking everything. So back here, the point I was trying to make is that the open versus closed distinction was a useful distinction when this meant I could personalize it on this side, but I couldn't personalize it on this side. With Android versus iOS, this distinction matters less, even though Android is significantly more open and there's a lot of apps that Apple just won't let me have that I could easily install on my Android phone. It doesn't feel as big because for the average user, having the App Store in the first place kind of destroys the distinction here. They open up the app, they look for the app they're looking for, they find it or they don't, and then they move on with their life. That feeling of choosing the things you're using on your device is what was important to these consumers, and they got that enough with Apple that they stopped thinking about it. This kind of pains me because I hate a lot of the ways the App Store is run. I've covered this many times in both this channel and even more so on my second channel. I don't like how Apple runs the App Store, but the harsh reality is that the average consumer doesn't care. They feel like the App Store gives them access to everything they'd ever wanted more, and realistically speaking, it does kind of do that. Because of this, iOS can be a real competitor, even though just years prior, macOS could not be. We saw this same breakdown occur in a different market with Meta, Oculus versus the world. In particular now, Apple with Vision Pro. And I guess now it would be Quest. And Zuck has been very specific with his thoughts here that this is also an open versus closed platform thing, where the amount of limitation you have on what Apple lets you do on the Vision Pro is great enough that you can't do the types of powerful interactive experiences you can on Quest, especially gaming stuff. Zuck bet hard on the open platform side with Quest versus Vision Pro, but it turns out it doesn't matter because this entire market's fucking garbage. I have come around to accepting the fact that nobody cares about VR. It doesn't matter how good the experience is. Nobody gives a fuck. And it breaks my heart because the Vision Pro is one of the biggest leaps in the quality of experience I've ever had. Like the gap from using a BlackBerry to an iPhone was smaller than the gap going from a Quest to a Vision Pro in terms of how thorough and good the user experience is, how big the gap feels. Like I went from feeling like the past to the future, and it doesn't fucking matter. Nobody cares because VR is a dead platform. So Meta has been betting on this. They had obviously made a big bet on the Quest being an open platform here, didn't see any sales, and they probably came to the same conclusion I came to, which is that this whole market sucks. The VR market will never make any money. It is dead in the water, which kind of clearly breaks Zuck's heart because I genuinely believe he really, really likes VR AR stuff, and this is like one of his passion projects. Just from like how he talks about it to where he's put his money in on it, it seems like he cared a lot about this, which is sad because there's no market here, and he has to accept that. So the obvious next thing they did was in the next war, they continued the open versus closed bet. Llama versus OpenAI. Kind of funny to say OpenAI, closed platform, Llama, open platform, but that is the truth here. Meta was continuing to bet on open platforms. They thought this would matter. And in a lot of ways it did. The only reason anyone used Meta models initially is because they were the open platform. We accepted that they were worse because they were open and we could do different things with them. But Meta's already lost the open platform side here. They already are being beat out by all of these Chinese labs doing stuff like DeepSeek, Qwen, the GLP stuff that we just saw that I'll be covering later. I said GLP before I meant GLM. Thank you for chat for correcting me. There's so much crazy innovation going on in the open model world. God, don't even get me started on Kimi K2. It's unbelievable what that model can do. Llama lost hard in the open versus closed distinction. Not because open loses, but because Llama lost in the open side. But remember what I was saying here before, where open versus closed stopped mattering around this point? Because at this point, it stopped being about which one gives me access to things and started being about which one feels more personal to me, which one feels like it will give me access to these different things. The point I'm trying to make here is that the distinction was never actually open versus closed. It was more a vibe of, can I get this to do what I want it to? And is this going to give me the experience I want to have or not? And Apple failed to do that with Mac. They just outright failed to make a compelling enough argument for the average person to go with Apple's way of thinking versus whatever way of thinking they wanted. Since the App Store happened so early on iOS, it felt more like I could pick what software I use, which you can on Android as well. But the standardization of the hardware meant that we stopped caring quickly about the phone itself, and Apple's software and the quality control there and the general feeling of it giving us what we want let Apple hold ground when previously they couldn't. The distinction was never actually open versus close. The distinction was ability to personalize and feel like this thing is doing what I want it to do. And it seems like Meta just had the same realization, or at the very least, they realized that open versus closed isn't good enough because when they're also competing with DeepSeek in this box, they'll lose. So instead of thinking of this as open versus closed, they're thinking of this as personal versus the rest, or personal versus work more specifically. It's clear that Llama can't compete in a lot of things here. Llama models suck at tool calls. They have way less world knowledge. They distill well, so you can steer them, but they're just not that good beyond that. And I can't be in Zuck's head or in the head of the people at these labs, but I would honestly have guessed that their thought process looks something like this. Day one, we can't beat OpenAI yet, so let's go open so people have a reason to use our work. That makes a ton of sense. Now people are using their work, distilling models. Cool, awesome. The next step was probably something like this. It will be expensive to beat DeepSeek. We should focus on useful things that it can't do, like tool calling. DeepSeek models still suck really hard at tool calls, so they probably started figuring out what that would look like internally. And as they were probably getting somewhat close, the next step, we got beat to market by Kimi K2. Maybe this open platform thing is too hard to compete in. Historically, one of the best parts of going with the open platform is that you don't have much competition, but there's way more competition in open models right now than closed ones, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. So Meta went from, we're going to win by going open, to, I'm guessing internally, we got beat by another open company. So instead, we're going to do things those ones can't do that make our AI more valuable for integration and usage in these different ways. And now they are where they are now, which is the harsh realization that the open space is also competing with tool calling. They can't win there either. It's probably worth finding a new edge. I'm sure at the same time they've been thinking a lot about this distinction, and they decided that since they lost in open versus closed, and they lost work as well, there's only one section left. Here is how I'm thinking about this now. We have the open platform versus closed platform, the personal versus work. I would argue that GPT-4o, for example, fit pretty squarely in personal closed, where it's good for things that you want to talk to it about. It's smart, it's capable. It's not as good for working in tasks, but it's very good to talk to and do things with. Something that's good for work in closed would be Claude 3.5 Sonnet. The difference here being that Claude 3.5, even though in my opinion it has a slightly better personality than GPT-4o, it's also really good at tool calls, which means that it's useful for integrations in things like different AI editors. When this split was happening, Meta felt pretty good because they were focused on the top half of the chart, the open side, and the closed side having a bunch of competition didn't matter to them because if they can win up here, there's a good chance that their win will slowly eke into everything else. Then R1 dropped. In a lot of ways, R1 is more open personal. It is really good at writing, and V3 in particular is still one of the most common models on OpenRouter for doing these types of things. If we hop into rankings here, switch this to role-playing, you'll get very interesting results where DeepSeek V3 is the most popular model for RP, and Gemini 2.0 Flash is the second most popular, and R1 is third. Kind of crazy that DeepSeek is slaughtering for roleplay. If we hop over to marketing, you'll see it's Gemini 2.5 Flash, GPT-4, hop over to trivia, bunch of Gemini models. Maverick somehow sneaks in there. Interesting. Legal health, all these other things. You're getting the point here. As smart and powerful as DeepSeek R1 was, its value was largely in being a thing that's nice to talk to. So that happened, and Meta realized, okay, that's fine. The work side's more valuable anyways. We're going to target here. Meta's goal was to win this space, and from here, expand to take over more and more of the chart. You might also be questioning, where does Mistral fit in here? They don't. Their stuff isn't useful for anything. Anyways, Meta's goal was to be this box, and they were probably prepping really hard to do that. But then Kimi K2 dropped, and soon afterwards, GLM 4.5 dropped. I'm going to break this model down very soon. It's pretty nuts. I don't know where the fuck ZAI came from and why they're on the 4.5 version of this model, but the benchmarks are crazy. It's really good at doing agentic stuff. It's even beating out Kimi K2, which was groundbreaking when it dropped. The ability to call tools properly is very, very good. I'm going to set up a more proper tool calling benchmark in the near future for that, but I've been very impressed with everything I've seen so far. Point here being that a lot of competition spun up there. At the same time, GPT-4o got better as a personal model, not because the model got smarter or they trained it different, but because all of the things they built around it got really good. Things like memory made 4o way more useful for the average person to just talk to than DeepSeek R1, which is still largely best when you give it a system prompt describing how it should behave and then have it write some dialogue for you or something. GPT-4o has tried so hard to be personal that they had a whole controversy around Sycophant Gate, if you remember that. I did my best to cover it at the time. That all happened because OpenAI wanted this model to feel as nice to talk to as possible, and other models they've done since then, like O4 Mini or O3 Pro, or all these other models they're doing, the reasoning models, are them fighting over there, while 4o is the workhorse making things feel personal. DeepSeek R1 doesn't have that type of tooling around it. You can't really have that tooling in an open model world. You also need a lot of other things to feel truly personal. Like, as cool as your chat history is, you know what's cooler? The people you're friends with on Facebook, the things you've sent on Messenger, the pictures you posted when you were 15 years old. Meta has a lot of personal things that they can give the tools and the models access to. Personal doesn't just mean it's nice to talk to anymore. Personal means it knows who you are, it knows a lot about you, and it can feel deeply integrated with you and the things you care about. I like that distinction here. Personalized is greater than personal. I agree there fully. It's almost like this new thing has happened here where we have to split the chart up even more. There we go. GPT-4o has gotten okay at being a personalized closed model, but it's personalized mostly based on memory. And maybe now if you integrate the Google Drive link and set it up to have access to your files or your mail or whatever, it might be better at that. But Meta's way better at this. They have way more data and way more ways to integrate it and way more hooks into your personal life. Meta just posted their earnings for the quarter. They hit 3.48 billion daily users. Half the world uses Meta software already. They are building things that are very personal to people that they're using every day, be it WhatsApp, be it Facebook, be it Instagram, be it many other weird things they own for some reason. They want to be the entry point for the things you like doing. And in a world where more and more work gets automated, money will exist more on the personal side. And with the heated competition everywhere to the right of this part, the only edge they have left is personalization. Their positioning here makes them really hard to beat. The same way that when you're trying to do an advertising platform, you can't really beat Google or Facebook because they have these deep networked profiles of individual users. They know who you are and what you like. They can make better recommendations than Twitter can because they don't know as much about you. That knowledge of you has become more important than ever because data is the key to success in the next generation of this AI race. It also means that they can print revenue by doing much more targeted ads, which is an interesting dynamic I hadn't even really thought about until I mentioned it this way. Where if you ask it where to eat and it knows what you like, it can be specific and put in a company that's paying them or has an agreement with Meta where whenever they refer a person to the restaurant, they get a cut. There's a lot of reasons that Meta is well positioned for this more personalized version of AI. And as personal AI is less about the personality and more about the things it knows and has access to, this shift is something that Meta's uniquely well positioned to do. It makes a lot of sense to me. I also think they're just not considering the open versus closed distinction anymore because it doesn't matter to them anymore. They were using that as an arm, as a lever to break into the market and get developers to love them because historically, devs like you equals you win. They've known that forever. That's how Meta thinks. They want developers to like their stuff because if developers like their stuff, they'll use their stuff and then they'll force all of their users to use it too. That strat isn't working because there's too much competition on that side, but there is no competition on this side. The only company that knows as much about you as Meta does is Google. That's the only one. If we think about it with that 90-10 split that they used earlier, where it was like previously 90% of people were farmers, now it's 2%. If we think of it this way, the way that they framed it and described it before, what did those 90% of people end up going to do instead when the technology automated the farming part? If right now the AI use cases are split like this, where on this side it's work and on this side it's fun, what happens when all of the work that we're doing gets fully automated? Because this is the split of how much the AI is being used, but if this is the split of how we're using our time and spending our money, what happens when the work split goes there? And we have all of this time for fun. We might all be unemployed in an economic crisis. Who knows how this is all going to go if it does happen. But in a world where there's a ton of competition to automate work and 90% of people don't have jobs anymore, what are they going to do? And I guess in this case, the more important question Zuck's asking is, what are they going to use AI for? If all the big labs are focused on winning and automating the workplace, what are the unemployed people going to go do now with their time? And what tools are they going to use? And what are they going to buy? What are they going to want to do? What is that future going to look like? And Meta's bet is that there's so much competition on this side that they can't win in anymore, that they're going to go this way instead. That's what they know. That's where their strengths are. That's where Meta has always won. It breaks my heart because Facebook Workspaces was actually a really cool product. Their way of thinking about talking about things with your coworkers was way cooler than Slack. I miss it dearly. But for the most part, Meta's tools have not made real headway in the workplace beyond, I guess, React is probably the best one. Beyond that, Meta doesn't sell to businesses well. They don't compete in the business world well. They focus on personal things. And I do think this shift in how they're thinking makes a ton of sense in that lens. That idea that their best advantage in the market is that 3.5 billion people are already using their shit. Curious to see how much money they can make from this, though. As a shareholder, my hopes are not very high. And as someone who sees a lot of numbers for how much these different models get used on T3 chat, no one cares about Llama at all right now. That's all I have to say on this chaos. The market's getting more and more interesting every day. I have no idea what these new personal experiences will look like with AI, but I'm curious what it looks like for them to solve it. Their only competition now is Apple, and Apple has no data. So it'll be an interesting dynamic. Curious to see how it goes. Let me know what y'all think. Until next time, keep prompting.